Good morning, Facebook. Welcome to the Happy to Parent Facebook Live Coffee Morning. I hope everybody is well. It's a beautiful day here in Drogheda. Today, our coffee mug is the wonderful Calvin and Hobbes. Thanks to Jess Bleakley for that, Jess. I really appreciate you sending me this mug. As anyone who follows me on Twitter will know, I'm a big fan of the Calvin and Hobbes series of animated little strips. They're very, very good, and I've enjoyed them for a long time. Apologies for last week. We had no coffee morning last week due to me having to do parent duty. So I had a meeting with my daughter's new school. So that's very exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking, but it is what it is. You know, I want to see her grow up and kind of move on to new things. So it's exciting. I hope everybody's well. As I say, we have a few questions that I think will really resonate with people today. Some of them, I suppose, I've experienced myself, and other people would have come across them with other people quite a bit as well. So let's just plough straight into it. Okay, a couple of months ago, my almost 9-year-old daughter had her first major disagreement with a friend. She wouldn't really tell us what it was about, only that her friend had made her mad and that they weren't friends anymore. It has come to our attention since that our daughter might have a hard time expressing when, because our oldest son has some anger issues related to autism spectrum disorders. She doesn't feel that it's okay to be angry or mad. How can we guide her to express these emotions appropriately? I think there's probably a lot of people will find, or maybe found from, with themselves, that they went through a time when they found it difficult to express their emotions, especially anger. And sometimes I think what we need to remember is anger is usually a mask for another emotion. So it's usually hurt, frustration, sadness, insecurity, whatever it might be, because it's easier for us to get mad at the person out there and focus whatever's making us feel insecure out there, because it's not our issue that we need to deal with. So, I work with a lot of adults who would experience that as well. So it's not unusual to see a child struggling to actually deal with what is going on for them if they are angry. So I suppose the first thing is that it's important that we show our children through our actions that it's okay to understand that there's something going on deeper than the anger. Sometimes we can cut things off and deal with the anger. And now, I'm fully aware that we need to deal with the anger. So if you see it through physical violence, if you see it through shouting, we need to deal with that. But if this is unusual for our child, we have to look at, well, something must be happening behind to make them express that, and help them deal with that, what's going on for them, by sitting down and asking them, has something happened? Now, they may not know, they may not be able to say what it is, they may just feel angry. And it's about then how you talk about, okay, if you're feeling angry, how might you deal with it so that you don't get in trouble? Now, obviously you're going to deal with the issue and give them a consequence if it's required for the outburst, but help them to focus on what's actually happening. And sometimes they might need to take a little bit of time to process themselves. But what I would say is, something that is very effective is get your child a little notebook. People who've worked with me in the past may have heard me use this before, but get a little notebook where they can write down what happened during the day for them. And there's no pressure on them to write. They can write if they want to. If they don't, that's okay. And you can write back about your day so that you learn more about what's going on for them. But ultimately what it does is it helps them to process what's going on in their heads. So those times where we wake up and we stub our toe, and then we, open the cupboard door into our heads, and, our boss gives out to us, and we come home and go, that was just the worst day. But actually, if we break it down, it was only 3 incidents during the day that caused you to be annoyed and frustrated. The rest of the day was actually quite good. You met up with a friend, you went for coffee, you got out for a jog or went to the gym, you had a bit of fun with your kids, whatever it might be. Those are the things that actually we should be focusing on, unless we need to deal with something around the frustrations. So get your child a little notebook, and it helps them to process what's going on for them. So they may feel that I had a horrible day because I had an argument with my friend, but ultimately they actually had quite a good day because they had spent so much positive time with friends and their family previous to that they could start to rationalize it and go, okay, this is only something small. And then you can start to role play some ways that they can deal with the anger and frustration better. So trying to recognize, one, what the emotion actually is that's going on for them. But two, start to kind of go, right, well, I suppose here's a little example. I've had this quite a bit where one child will come in and say, Johnny down the road has hit me. And our natural reaction as a parent is go, right, let's go and sort this out. But what we don't realise is that our son or daughter had actually picked Johnny's ball and kicked it over the wall. So Johnny was annoyed and he hit. So sometimes it's about getting that other perspective and realising that, okay, what do we all need to do to actually make this situation better in the long run? So help her walk through some ways that she could help to deal with this with her friend and make it a bit better. And sometimes we have to just leave it a little while because kids will go up and down and up and down and up and down in their relationships, and they'll have arguments and they won't talk to each other for a couple of days. But sometimes they'll figure it out much quicker if they're just left to it. So it's trying to get that balance. But I think it's important that we help our kids to express what emotions are going on for them and help them to process it in their own time. And that's why the notebook is a really good idea, because it gives them that space in their own room or wherever it might be to write out what's going on for them, and that there's no judgment going to come from you as a parent as to what they're going to say in there. That you're only dealing with what they are telling you. I hope that's of some help. Good morning, Jennifer. It's good to see you. I'm very fine, thank you. And thank you for joining in today. Okay, our second question. My 6-year-old plays outside with his friends all the time. We live in an estate with lots of other kids, and it's fantastic as my kids have loads of friends. Our worry is that our son told us that a man approached them while walking his dog and offered them some sweets. It has made us and our neighbours very nervous. How do I talk to my son about stranger danger without scaring the daylights out of him? And I think that last line is really, really significant, because what we could do is tell our kids to not talk to strangers whatsoever. But then if we're out with them and we have someone, an acquaintance that we meet, and they say hello to our child and our child doesn't respond, and we get annoyed at our child for not responding when we've told them don't talk to strangers. And it's about teaching them about awareness, and a lot depends on their age. So I suppose here we're dealing with a 6-year-old. If you have a child who's a little bit younger, really they shouldn't be somewhere where you're not there, or where there isn't a responsible adult that's in charge of them there with them to oversee things. With a 6-year-old, you're given that little bit more flexibility and freedom to go out and play with their friends. But again, you or another adult should be watching them. You should be keeping an eye on them, because it's important that you know where they are and you set parameters and boundaries for them, like physical parameters for them. You cannot go beyond that post. You cannot go here. You cannot go in behind houses, whatever it might be. And it's important that they understand that, and that you're very clear about what the reasons are. It's to keep them safe. Now, this may have been just a very kind gentleman coming up with us, taking his dog for a walk, and actually just happened to have some sweets. It may have been very innocent, but it might not. And it's okay for you to say to your child that if anyone asks them to go with them or to, help them find something that they've lost, that they have to come and ask your permission before they can do it, even if they know them. And that's the important thing, because we all worry about stranger danger, but in actual fact, the majority of cases where somebody suffers abuse is usually at the hands of somebody that they know. It could be a family member, it could be somebody else, so that they don't go off with anybody without coming and checking with you. And that includes friends, it includes friends' parents, it includes family members. They need to know. And even if the person says, I've spoken to your parents about it, you come and check as the child. The other thing is that you talk to them about literally the stranger danger. That sometimes some adults may not have the best interests of a child at heart. So it's important that even if somebody seems very nice, that you still don't go off with them, that you still don't go near a car, you still don't go for a walk with them. And it's okay to teach them to always check. But again, you as the adult need to be able to check in where they are. You need to have an idea of where they are because anything can happen. Anything can happen. Now, the majority of times things don't happen, and that most people they meet will actually be positive adults that they'll have positive interaction with, and that's fantastic. But it's about actually just teaching them that they need to have that awareness. And I'm sure some of you listening are kind of going, my child has no awareness whatsoever of anything. But how they learn it by you reinforcing it, and you may need to put consequences in place. So if they wander off with somebody else, or if they wander off beyond the boundaries of where they're meant to go, you put the consequence in place so that they understand the importance and the significance of them keeping that boundary. It's really important. I hope that one helps. And because you don't want to scare your child away from any interactions or positive interactions that they might have with people. Right. My child constantly interrupts me when I'm talking to other people, and it's driving me mad. I don't want to lose it with her in front of the people and embarrass her or the person I'm speaking to, but I'm struggling to deal with it. Any suggestions? There are definitely many, many parents out there listening whom that will have experienced this, and it can be extremely frustrating, especially if it's on a persistent basis. So you can very simply put boundaries in place here and say, if I'm speaking to somebody, you come up and you say, excuse me, and then you wait for me to reply. Now, that seems very simple, and technically it should be quite simple to put in place. Our kids sometimes get overexcited and don't necessarily recognize that as the thought process, because kids live in the moment so much. But again, it's about reinforcing it. So it's about saying to your child, you need to wait till I'm finished speaking to somebody, and then I will deal with it, unless it's an emergency. If it is an emergency, say to me, excuse me, Mum, excuse me, Dad, it's an emergency, can I speak to you? And then you'll absolutely give them your attention. But don't always give them the attention, because if you say to them, come up and say, excuse me, and they come up and don't say, excuse me, and you still engage with the process with them, then they're not going to learn, because your actions are actually saying the complete opposite of what you're verbally saying, what your words are saying. So it's important that you stick to those boundaries. And most people aren't going to mind if you're engaging with them, if your child comes up and needs to speak to you. Most of them are going to understand it. But at the same time, it's important that you teach them that boundary, because it's about respect. It's respecting you. There are many parents out there who will probably say, every time I'm on the phone, there's a child looking for my attention. It's almost like they hear the ring and it's, I have to go and speak to Mum right now because the phone is ringing. So it's important that you can put those boundaries in place for your own sanity, so that you don't lose it all the time. Okay. Jennifer, what are we saying here? So when they say your mum, dad, parents, etc. have sent me, it is advisable to open a common password that only the child and selected people know. That's really good. So you can say to them that here's a password, and if they don't have that password, you can't go away with them. I would always encourage them, first and foremost, though, to always come and ask you first, no matter who it is. But I think that's a really, really good idea. And thanks, Jennifer, for sharing that. That's a really good one. So create a password that if the other person doesn't have, your child can't go with them. But I would always say, as I've pointed out, that the most important thing is that they come and say to you, they come and ask you whether the other person says that you've given permission or not. Okay, last one for today. I have 3 young children and they completely run all over me. I have no control in my home. And while I love my children, I hate our life at the moment. Please help. That's a very heartfelt question. And again, I think it's something that will resonate with a lot of parents out there tuning in. And I think the very first thing to say is it's important that you can admit that you're struggling. It's important that you can admit that you need a bit of support and that you've come looking for it. So what I will say is, if after taking on board what we're going to talk about now, you're still struggling with it, you may need to go and speak to somebody, go and speak to a professional for a couple of reasons. One, you get that space where you can talk about yourself, because sometimes what you'll do is you'll protect your partner, or you protect the family and friends, or you just won't want to talk about it, because what they'll do is they'll tell you, do this, do this, do this. Sometimes they might say, I told you, you needed to do X, Y, Z, and you didn't do it. And that necessarily isn't a positive thing for you, and it doesn't help your state of mind. So if you do need professional support, go and get it. You deserve it. And getting it out is going to have a huge positive impact on you. Now, the next thing I'll say is, it's about boundaries. And people will probably say they're sick to the back teeth of me going on about this, but it is so true. The most important thing is putting boundaries in place and having consequences to back up those boundaries that will actually have an impact on your kids. Because one of the big things is, people will say to me, you know, I have a boundary and the consequences just don't work. Well, if they don't work, don't use them. You can't use them. There's literally, you might as well do nothing as put a consequence in that doesn't matter to your child. And I will also get parents who will say, well, I don't know what's going to work because my parents and my children don't seem to care about anything in particular. But there will be things that will actually have an impact. Be it bedtime, be it losing screen time, be it not being allowed out to play with their friends, or go and do their activities. And some parents again will say to me, yes, but I don't want them missing out. I don't want them losing out on the things that, you know, they love. Guess what? If it works as a consequence, use it, because you need to get as many consequences as you possibly can in order for your child to learn these boundaries. And why do we put boundaries in place? For safety. For our children's safety, so that they will be kept safe. Also, for their personal boundaries, so they know what's okay and what's not okay for them, but also for the structure as well. We live in a structured society, so unless you're taking your kids off to the woods to live off the land, there's times where they need to go to school, you need to go to work, they need to have lunch, dinner, bedtime, etc. And then for negotiation and consistency is going to be the key, that you don't just let it off because you're tired, that you don't just let them off because it's the weekend, but you can give that bit of wiggle room where, okay, it's the weekend, you can stay up that little bit later. What I would suggest to you is you get consequence jars for each of your kids. So they're a little jar, and you write down all the consequences that you think will work with your child, and you fold them up and pop them into the jar. And you have a jar for each child, because different consequences are going to impact on different kids. And then you have a blank one as well. And the blank one is the mercy card, and that is where your child gets off. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. One, you're getting them to take control of their actions. So it's also giving you the space to say, if you carry on with this behaviour, you're going to have to go to the consequence jar. And you're not trying to think up a consequence on the spot that ultimately might be something that doesn't work, or might be over the top because you're so tired, frustrated, upset, and then you have to roll back on it. So you say to them, if you carry on with this behaviour, you're going to have to go to the consequence jar. The reason there's a mercy one in there is because it breaks the cycle of conflict in their head and doesn't create an absolutely immense amount of fear in them where, I don't want to go near that consequence jar. What they start to do is go, oh, I might get the blank one and get away with it. So then you say that then you decide the length of the consequence depending on the severity of what it is. So you're starting to put the consequences in place. Be very clear what the boundaries are with your kids so that they understand you are not allowed to do X, not allowed to do Y, not allowed to do Z. Don't try and change it all in one go. take bit by bit. So what are the most frustrating things that you have going on with your kids for you? So what are the things they're doing individually that are causing you upset? And take them one step at a time. You cannot be Superman or Superwoman. It is not possible. So it's important that you break it down and just deal with things bit by bit. And kids are way more adaptable than adults. So they will fall into line. Trust me, it will happen. If you are consistent, they will fall into line if the consequences are effective enough. So once you start to do that, you can look at positive things. So look at what are the things that you actually want to encourage as opposed to the negative things. So have star charts, have reward charts if you feel that's going to work better for your child. So it's about you sitting down, getting the headspace. So get away from the house, get someone to come in and babysit. If you have a partner, sit down with them. Express your emotions about it, because sometimes when we sit down with a partner and say, I'm really upset when the kids don't flush the toilet, and your partner's looking at you going, that's not a big deal. But if it is a big deal for you, name why it's a big deal. And then for each child, look at the possible solutions that might work to help you deal with the situation, and then put into practice how you're going to plan it out, how you're going to run it, and then give it a go. But don't put any weight behind the outcome. Because if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. You've tried something different. And we have a cycle. So it's what we would call the dance, where we do the same steps and the same expectations. So if we have a conflict with our partner, what you usually find is that something causes the argument. You both say and do pretty much the same thing, and then you don't talk to each other or whatever it might be, and then you make up and kind of go, oh well, I'm just stressed, or there's a lot going on. And it's the same thing over and over again. But we as the adult can actually break that cycle by changing how we react in the situation. I know you're tired. I know you're frustrated. It is so difficult and so disheartening when every single morning you're waking up, probably with a knot in your stomach, saying, what the hell is today going to bring with these three? And no one is sitting here saying you don't love your kids. It's clear you do, but it's okay to be upset and frustrated. I hope that's of some help. If you do, ultimately, if you need professional help, get it. Get it. Come back to me. Send me an email and we'll sort something out. We'll converse and we'll help you come up with strategies that are going to work. But start with this, because some parents will say to me, will you come and work with my kids to get them on side, to get them to behave, to get them to, toe the line? But I will always say to parents, the most important one to get them involved in this, or to get them to do this, is you. Because you're the one who's living with them all the time, and they need to not put somebody else ahead of you in the pecking order or the hierarchy of the house. Because we can be friends with our kids when they're older. I'll say it over and over and over again. We can be friends with our kids when they're adults. Our job now is to teach them about life, and they're only learning. So, sometimes it feels like we teach them and we teach them and they teach them and we teach them, and it doesn't change. But then we have to change it. It's not up to them to change it. We need to change our approach. We need to change the consequences, the boundaries, whatever it might be, to actually help them to learn. Okay, that's us from today. I hope everyone has a great Wednesday. I hope if it's sunny where you are, you're enjoying the sun. If it's rainy, you're enjoying the rain. From me, Calvin and Hobbs, I will see you next week. Take care, guys.